This session is on negotiation and communication. In this session, we look at understanding the key elements in effective negotiation and also identifying different negotiation styles and the implications for these different styles in the workplace. For a bit of fun, have a look at the video link, the Adam Sandler film Just Go With It, in terms of negotiation. So negotiation is a way of getting what you want through being able to persuade others. So being able to persuade others is critical in negotiation. In terms of workplace negotiation, it's a joint examination of the opposing claims of employers and employees to resolve or avert conflict by reaching a solution that is acceptable to both parties. So the key there is in terms of reaching a solution that is acceptable to both parties. And we'll talk a bit about win-win type outcomes. And also, it's really important when you think of reaching that solution that you may need to think outside the square, that you may need to be creative in terms of reaching a possible solution, and we'll talk a bit about that too. Have a think in terms of why negotiation is so important in the workplace, and list as many reasons as you can in about 5 minutes. Some of the key areas with negotiation and why it is so important is it is inevitable. It's a large part of our professional and our personal lives, and it's important to know how to negotiate effectively to ultimately get what you want. Negotiation is also a form of airing concerns and issues in the workplace. And through negotiation, it gives you the opportunity to develop new and different solutions to rectify some of those issues and concerns. Key aspects of negotiation. It obviously involves setting some sort of goals and objectives. It's a process which we'll talk about in the next session. Negotiation can be formal or informal. So obviously we can look at formal negotiations at work through perhaps negotiating terms and conditions of employment, negotiating pay rates, salary. Negotiation can be done individually in terms of you negotiating with your supervisor, and also maybe negotiated using the collective, perhaps through trade unions. Negotiation can occur at all different levels. So fair work, the role of the state, down to the daily individual issues. Parties are often interdependent, so we need to be mindful of that when we're negotiating. We need to make sure that we separate the people from the issues as a result. Probably one of the critical aspects with negotiation is that it helps to build these interpersonal relationships. So with this session, we want to talk about some of the ways that we can negotiate successfully in order to enhance those long-term relationships. Some of the key terms with negotiation, we talk about a BATNA, which is the best alternative to the negotiating agreement, versus the WATNA, which is the worst alternative to the negotiating agreement. We'll also talk a bit about interest and positions. Just a few points in terms of your BATNA. So that's the best alternative to the negotiating agreement. So when you obviously enter a negotiation, you have a key outcome in mind in terms of what you might be willing to accept. Let's just say that you're a HR manager and you're looking to talk to your manager about a pay rise. And perhaps the best outcome for that, the optimal point for you, say you earn 60,000, you want to increase to 65,000. So your BATNA is the best alternative. What you want to do with that alternative is you want to look at what your options are and think about the type of leverage that you have entering into that negotiation. So the fact that knowledge and information firstly gives you that leverage, that you would have researched positions and maybe you've found out that with your current experience, skills, knowledge and so forth, that you should be at that 65,000. But perhaps you walk into that negotiation and you ask for that additional 5,000 and your boss says no. You need to then think about what your best alternatives are. Is it to walk away and to perhaps find a new job where you're paid perhaps at that 65,000 level? Or perhaps an alternative for you might be that you start your own business, your own HR consultancy perhaps. Is that an option for you? I mean, your worst alternative may be to lose that job. So you need to think of what your alternatives are before you enter any negotiation. It's also interesting to think whether good negotiators are born or made. So one argument is that negotiators are born, that you're born with certain personality traits, it's in your DNA, if you like, that helps you to become a good negotiator. Other arguments is that negotiators are made, that through your experiences, you learn, you develop into a good negotiator. And I guess the best answer here is that it's usually a combination. Okay, it's definitely not just based on personality traits, but the fact that you might be more extrovert, more confident, may mean that you have positive negotiator skills. However, a lot of the development, the training, is what is important that goes into making a good negotiator. The experiences, the fact that if you're constantly engaging in negotiations is naturally going to make you a more successful negotiator. I want you to have a look at this video in terms of the use of humour in negotiating a better deal. Once you've watched the video, I want you to think about what your thoughts are in relation to using humour to negotiate a better deal. List some reasons perhaps why you agree and why you would disagree with using humour. So talking about power and the role of power in negotiations. So there's two types of power. One is what we call formal or positional power. The other is called informal or personal power. So when we look at formal power, we look at this coercive power. So as a boss, as a supervisor, you may use coercion to get your employees to perform. If you don't meet that sales target, then you're fired, for example. On the flip side, you also would use rewards. If you meet that sales target, you'll get a $100 bonus as a reward. You're also using what we call your legitimate power. The fact that you're a HR manager, the fact that you're a supervisor, that you're a boss, you're a CEO, gives you a legitimate role with legitimate power in an organization. Then you've also got what we call informal or personal power. The fact that you are an expert in your field. The knowledge that you have, being a doctor, being an accountant, for example, gives you a sense of power. And this is closely linked to also information power. The fact that you know something that other people don't gives you that power, gives you that leverage. People then rely on you to get that certain information, and that's really critical from an employability point of view. And then there's also what we call referent power, and probably the most powerful in terms of your leverage in an organization. This is to do with charisma. It's to do with the fact that people aspire to be like you. All forms of power are particularly important in negotiation because it gives you leverage. Power that you're obviously a supervisor or a boss gives you leverage in that negotiation. Power because you know something more than others gives you that leverage and that power. The fact that people aspire to you and they listen to you and want to be like you, of course, also gives you that power. So I guess the best types of power is a combination of formal and the informal power. However, just remember that some of that formal power can be taken away. If you were to be demoted or lose that role, then you lose that power alongside it. So the best type of power to have is the informal or the personal power, because no one can take that away. I want you to think of examples that you know of where parties to a negotiation have exerted power over the other. So perhaps you were buying a car, and were there different uses of power? Think about why this was, and also what was the outcome. interests and positions are also key when it comes to negotiation. You want to look at what the interest is in terms of why, that underlying issue that's driving the negotiation. And then you're also looking at your position in terms of what, so that particular expression of interest. If we look at some of the interests of a manager in terms of enhancing performance and employees in terms of work-life balance, and with the position we look at managers with longer shifts and employees wanting shorter shifts. When we just look at the position in terms of what, and we've got managers that want longer shifts and employees that want shorter shifts, it looks like it would be impossible to reconcile the two. Shorter shifts versus longer shifts. So is there an underlying joint interest? But when we start to look at why managers want longer shifts, their rationale is to enhance performance. When we look at why employees want shorter shifts, they want more work-life balance. They want to perhaps do a 3-4 hour shift, maybe then go home and have dinner with their family and then go back to work. It's not until we look at the underlying interest, the reason of why they're wanting that particular outcome, that we can maybe start to reconcile. So research suggests that work-life balance actually leads to enhanced performance. So with looking at the why, we can reconcile the two. Having shorter split shifts and the fact that employees have that work-life balance will lead to enhanced performance. Okay, so really important to focus on the interests of that negotiation. In terms of looking at negotiating style, this is one way that we can look at the different way to negotiate. Now, negotiation style may be as a result of your own style, personality, perhaps, your personal preference for how you like to do things, or it also may be governed by the situation. And a great way to engage in negotiation is also to put your personal preferences, some of your personality traits a little bit to the side, and also think a little bit about the outcome, the environment, and the situation that you will be negotiating in. So when we look at these negotiating styles, we're in a sense trading off the concern for substance or the outcome of the negotiation. How important is it to you to win and to ultimately get what you want, versus how important is it to have a long-standing relationship with this party? So is that high or low? And these are the two aspects that you'll be thinking about when we look at these types of negotiating styles. So we've got the competing, avoiding, compromising, collaborating, and accommodating. So I want you to find out what your negotiating style is. So the negotiating style questionnaire is alongside the lecture notes on the course site. And I want you to think, once you've found out your negotiating style, what are the implications, both positive and negative, when you enter into a workplace negotiation. Remembering it's really important to be aware of your style and be aware of the strengths and weaknesses that come with that style. I want you to have a look at the 5 negotiating styles and think about different workplace situations where you might have been involved in, where you would perhaps use these certain styles. So for example, you might actually avoid the negotiation completely if you were maybe a new employee, or perhaps you didn't have much knowledge on the topic, or perhaps it didn't affect you in your position. You might use more of a competing negotiating style if you're perhaps buying a new car. It may not be as important to you to foster a positive relationship with a car dealer, for example, so you may be more likely to use a competing style. You might be more compromising when it comes to work. If your boss asks you to work late one night, you might compromise and then he lets you or she lets you leave early the following day. You might be more accommodating, again, if you've just started a new graduate position, in terms of working more hours or perhaps taking on additional tasks because you're learning. And you might collaborate more if you're working together with someone on a research project, or some type of work project where you can clearly see that both parties are benefiting equally. And some of the styles are extended here. So accommodating, when you're wanting to learn, you're wanting to build those relationships, so that's particularly important, like perhaps in a new job. You compromise often when you're under time pressure. You want to make some sort of settlement or outcome. You're eager to close those negotiations. You're competing when you obviously need to make a quick decision. There might be issues where it's vital to the company welfare in order to make those decisions. So I use the example of the Queensland health reforms, and some of the decisions perhaps made by Campbell Newman were more of a competing type nature. Avoiding, perhaps you don't want to confront the issue. The disruption perhaps outweighs some of the benefits, so you may maybe avoid bringing up concerns. And this could also be a political move as well, that you don't want to make waves again, maybe when you're starting in a new organisation. The optimal negotiation style, if you like, is the collaborating, where you have what we call a true sort of win-win. There's benefits for the substance and the outcome, and also for the relationship. So you're trying to find a solution. You're also concerned with learning. There's commitment there from both parties. Now, my view on collaborating is it's very difficult to get a true collaboration when we're looking at employees and employers, when we've often got different interests. So employers are looking at the bottom line. They're looking at performance, profitability, productivity, where employees are wanting work-life balance. They're wanting to be paid more. They're wanting additional benefits, flexible hours, and so forth. Where the true collaboration comes into play, when we're looking at partnerships, we're looking at people who already work on an equal playing field. So academics collaborating on a research project, partnerships perhaps between two organisations, or two individuals working on a project that is going to have equal benefits for both parties, is often where we're more likely to see the collaborating style of negotiation.